making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting pages of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have been given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premise must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency routes are clearly signed, and once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Girls' Hall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. So, first of all, appointments for substitutes.
We have Councillor Riaz for Councillor Gregson and Councillor Eltoft for Councillor Bayliss. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest?
Just declare as a member of the County Council item 5 and 6.
Anybody else? And Councillor Ditter. And James. We don't have any public participation. So, first of all, we've got the minutes of our last meeting on the 6th of June. And we'll take them page by page. So, page 1, page 2, and page 3. Are there any matters arising? If they're not, then I'll sign them as a agreed record. So, first of all, we've got UK Shared Prosperity bidding funding bid, so it's over to Zoe West.
Good evening, everyone. The report is looking for confirmation of the confirmed preferred projects and permission to submit for the deadline of the 1st of August, overseen by the Managing Director. So the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we have an allocation of 2.945472 available to us. The programme is broken down into 3 theme areas. It's a mixture of revenue and capital funding, and we are asked to identify headline projects that we would like to fund through this programme. There's been a period of consultation with community groups, partners, key stakeholder partners, housing organisations, colleges and the university, and we think these projects are the ones that we can deliver effectively and will meet the outputs and outcomes that we're required to achieve through the UK SPF programme. So we've got 3 themes: community in place, which covers town centres, local arts and cultural activities and sporting facilities. We've got support for local business, which is a whole agenda around research and development, business growth, business start-up, and incubator schemes, those sort of things. And we've got people and skills. Now, the people and skills theme, we can't fund until year 3. Because this is a replacement for the EU programme, some of those projects are still running, particularly the ESF projects that cover the skills agenda. So we aren't allowed to fund until the final year. The only option we've got to be able to fund before then is for projects that were delivered by community voluntary sector organisations. If their programmes are running out before the final year, then we are allowed to look at those and potentially fund some of those. But we'll go on to some of those projects and I'll explain in more detail. So we have to, within our bid, we have to identify how we're going to deliver, what we're going to deliver, what we're going to apportion the money to, and what outputs and outcomes we're looking to achieve through that funding. We have worked with key partners from other local authorities, including North Worcestershire, Malvern and Wychavon, purely because some of the projects are very similar to some of the ERDF programmes around the growth deal and growth hub activities. And actually it gives us a far wider programme if we can share our resources to deliver against some of those. So we are looking at partnership working with some of our colleagues across Worcestershire. We have funding up until 24-25. The programme should actually start in the last 6 months of this year, but we will be very tight on how much we can actually deliver in that period of time. The bid, as I say, goes in the beginning of next week, or is due at the beginning of next week, but we are not likely to hear whether we have the funding until October at the earliest. We can deliver at risk if we so choose, or we can backload our payments towards the end of the year if we want to do that. But it will be difficult to deliver much in the first 6 months. So the majority of the programme will happen in the 2 years post that, so 23, 24, 24, 25. So if we look down at the projects that we've identified, for Community in Place, there are a range of projects and activities. If I go through them gradually, wayfinding. The wayfinding, we're looking at feasibility and installation of some wayfinding signage and totems across the city centre. It's been on the agenda for a while and we've not actually been in a position to achieve it so far. So we're looking at a small amount of funding to do an assessment of what we need and what we can deliver, and then an element of capital to actually deliver some of those activities. We are looking to establish an arts and cultural forum and a heritage forum. Now this is to bring together, we have an awful lot of partners that deliver in these areas and don't necessarily work together or aren't necessarily in the same network, so we're trying to bring those together so we can be more effective in developing our offer, and also for fundraising purposes. So if we're bidding together for money from Heritage Lottery or the Arts Council, actually we probably have a stronger bid if we work together. So that's bringing those forums together from stakeholders across those various areas, and also a small amount of money attached to it for activities that they may identify will help the network. We're looking at extending the events programme that has currently been delivered across the city and the local area. We're working in partnership with Seven Arts to do extend that festivals and those activities to bring footfall into the city and to engage our local communities in the activities that we're doing for a sense of well-being and a sense of excitement about the city and about Worcester. We are looking to extend the community grants programme that we currently deliver through our communities team. That's an offer for smaller community groups that can apply for funding to deliver activities, and that's right across Worcester. And that's for a range of activities. It can be arts related, it can be community related, it's whatever they are looking to deliver if they've identified a need in the local area. We are looking at an extension and continuation of the asset-based community development programme. Now, some of you may be aware of this programme. What it is looking to do is bring in to place some community enablers to work across the communities to identify opportunities to work together, opportunities to develop partnerships and networks in the local communities, to start working and delivering together to achieve for those local communities. We're also looking at a feasibility study. Now, this is a small feasibility study. We have a large development for performing arts within our Future High Streets Fund, but we also have a number of crafts-based and hands-on arts organisations who aren't covered in that and are looking to work together to identify a space that they can have studio space in, and then they can develop and deliver the applied arts activities from there. So that's looking at a feasibility study that can support that ambition. We've also looking at capital funding enhancements for the museum and art gallery, particularly around disability access. and access for the gallery. Some of that was included in another project earlier, but it's to actually get that moving and to be able to deliver some of those access requirements. This project, the Entity Retail and Property Enhancement Programme, it's sitting in communities, but it could easily sit in business and local business. And this is to actually bring back into use some of the empty properties and also do some improvements on the properties that don't look so great in the high street. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the city centre, it can be in communities too, but it's actually bringing those retail spaces back into use and looking better and improving the appearance of them for the whole community.
Could you just clarify?
Of course.
How much it actually is?
For each of the projects?
No.
Just for that one?
Just that one.
We're looking at around £300,000 for that, and that will be broken down into grant applications that businesses can apply to deliver improvements to those properties. Okay. Are there any other questions on the communities projects?
Yeah, thanks. Given the fact that there is quite clearly signed in, given the fact that there is pretty clearly defined split in terms of capital and revenue, that how we can use the funding should we be successful. Excuse me. What sort of work can we do? How would that work in terms of empty retail and property enhancement? Given the fact that you know, some of this would be of its very nature a capital investment, and some of it what might be regarded as more revenue. Is there a really sort of clear view of how we can potentially invest in this so that we stay within the parameters of the you know, that we've been offered?
Yeah, we're ring fencing amounts of money to go towards each project. So we do have some flexibility each year with the funding we have. So if we find that the applications are more focused around revenue and that we need to increase the revenue attachment to it, then we will have the opportunity to have a look at that in the second year. But from experience of delivering the empty retail unit so far, the majority of that has been capital requirements. So we've ring-fenced that capital money to suit that for the programme at the moment.
Is this an extension of the work that's been done on Angels?
Yeah, so it's broadening it out further than that area to other properties in other areas.
Jo.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question really, where you've got your point about extension of events programme delivered by, established Art and Culture Heritage Forum, looking for support of local arts, etc. Are you aware of a burgeoning campaign to turn right from the station?
Sorry. Like a campaign?
Foregate Street Station,
Yeah.
Everybody turns left, goes to town. Are you aware of this idea that people get to turn right instead and go to the art gallery in the Georgian end of the city?
No, but it can be built into some of those activities. So if when we haven't specified at this point the activities that people will have to deliver with that. So if that is actually something that people want to get behind and want to deliver on, then it can be built into that the activities.
How's it done, I guess, is what was.
Yeah, so when we actually come down to sit down with the people who will deliver it for us, we can raise that with them and say, actually, we need to look at this. What can we do here? How can we develop this? And how can we pick up on that idea to make it work for the city? So we still have plenty of flexibility in the programme at the moment, so we can pick up an awful lot of initiatives that aren't necessarily identified straight away, but we can work with partners to do that.
Okay, so we mentioned about that's done, yeah?
Yeah.
If I can let Philip Burke is actually on.
Sorry to kind of hijack from Zoe on this one, because I've been part part of the turnout of right out of Foregate Street Group. In fact, we were one of the founding organisations in towards it. Obviously, Zoe has come in more recently, and so probably hasn't had the chance to be updated on it yet. So this was a group where we, the big cultural players in Worcester. So this is the Art Gallery, Seven Arts, other theatres, and also some of the bigger businesses up in the north end of Foregate Street area have got together with, and the university, sorry, identifying that there's an awful lot of creative activity happening in the north end of Worcester, and actually if we work together we can be more coherent, more bigger and better, I guess, by working together, and in order specifically to do that, to encourage people to turn right out of Foregate Street with the lovely acronym ROOFS, which means right out of Foregate Street. As yet, that we haven't got anything concrete, although we've had a lot of very positive networking meetings, and I think this is absolutely something that then we build on as part of this next stage of the project. And always with these things, if there's money that enables us then to lever in additional funding, some private funding, to make something bigger as a network, then that's what takes us forward.
Thank you, Chair. Before you started talking about the community, you said we could always deliver at risk. Mm-hmm. So what are the risks, is my first question. Okay. And my second question is on about the empty retail and property enhancement grant programme extension. Bit of a mouthful. You mentioned that it could be spent on outlying areas and not just the city centre. Can we be a bit more positive about that?
Absolutely.
And be a bit more firm in our application? Thank you, David. So I'll let you answer the risks question then.
The risk question is it's the amount of time it takes for them to approve our investment plan. So we have to rely, if we start delivering straight away, it may be that they come back and say, actually, we want you to rejig your financial profile. We want you to put more money into the community element, or they want you to put more money into the business element up front. So if we've begun to deliver, actually we may end up having to play catch up quite a lot with the funding that we hand out when we work with partners. Okay. We should always catch up, because we will always have that 2.9 million available and will be coming in at some point. But for the first 6 months, if we don't hear until November, actually we're going to have to pay it out of our own pockets and claim it back later.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Just a thought, really. Given that Foregate Street as a traffic highway is not an essential part of the infrastructure of the city, what would your thoughts be about promoting removal of traffic from it altogether?
Thank you. I think I'll pick this one up. Transport is not a part of the UK SPF bid, and so I think it's somewhat outside the scope of any discussion with regard to the UK SPF report. However, I will say that City Council officers are currently working with County Council officers in terms of how we improve the, I was going to use the word permeability, you know what I mean, the access across the road when we get to the arches. And we have a report going to P&R committee tomorrow night, and I don't want to steal their thunder, but we seem now to have got to a position where we've agreed a compensation agreement with Archco so that we can proceed with the demolition of the building immediately opposite the station, which is what we wanted. So we are we are currently talking to County about how we can improve that access across the road in some shape or form. I will only go as far as that at the moment. Moving traffic completely off of Foregate Street, I think, would be a much bigger challenge, and something that wouldn't fall within the scope of the UK SPF. But discussions are ongoing, so I just wanted to reassure you that we are looking to try and improve the situation as best we can. Thank you.
We go on to local business.
Okay, this is a range of projects, some of which are, have developed out of the ERDF programme previously, others that are new. One of the differences with the local business programme now that we are not restricted by European requirements is we can work with retail. We couldn't previously due to EU regulation, so we can actually work with retail now, and that they've been excluded previously. So we are looking to extend the funding of the Growth Hub to do some intense business engagement and support, and some specialist advice and guidance for our businesses across the area. We are also looking at delivering some promotions and campaigns for the visitor economy. So working with some of our partners within the visitor economy to promote the activity that we've got and to show everyone how great Worcester is for the long term. We also have a programme of business energy efficiency assessments and grants for low carbon opportunities for organisations and businesses across the city. And there's an element for business research and innovation support. That's building on the opportunity for business growth for some organisations that may want to move to the next stage of their development and delivery. So it's a range of opportunities there. There is actually one we missed out, and I've just realised. There is a programme of grant support for businesses, so business startups that are looking for initial funding to help them get going and establish themselves as business. So that will be in there too. Are there any questions on the business ones?
It's not a direct question.
Okay.
Given the response I've just heard about the road. But every plan to grow the economy in whatever space is inevitably hampered by the fact we don't have a decent bus service that's fit for purpose. And so I just wanted to register that a good bus service, especially one that runs after 7:30 at night, would underpin a lot of this development. So I absolutely understand this is not for this committee, but if not here, where? And yeah, anyway, just to register that, and I think it would be a thing to be looked at in the right place.
No? People and skills.
People and skills, bear in mind this is the one that we are restricted in when we can deliver. We do have one project that is delivered by the voluntary sector through the ESF programme. That is due to end next year, and that's the BBO project, that's Building Better Opportunities project. It's a partnership of delivery. It's led by Community Housing Partnership and also includes a number of voluntary organisations within it. And it looks to support the hardest to reach through life skills activities and developing their ESOL, developing language and confidence building for people that are furthest from the labour market. So we are looking to extend that programme of activity, and we can actually fund some of that within the first year, purely because the programme will run out of funding. We don't want to lose it completely. We are looking at a programme of digital skills. One of the things that our businesses have been saying is that one of their biggest skills gaps when they're trying to recruit are the digital skills, individual people's digital skills as far as CVs are concerned, and when people are actually looking for work. So we're looking at delivering a programme of digital skills. We are looking at some adult skills for individuals that are in employment but maybe want to retrain or want to increase their qualifications or increase their skills levels. So we are looking at a sort of bridging programme for people to actually be able to do that whilst in employment. We also have the Green Skills programme. This is looking to work on and develop some of the activities that we are doing around the green agenda and the low carbon agenda to actually get our people ready for it and trained, particularly younger people, but also those that want to retrain, so that they are actually able to work in that sector and actually make the most of the opportunities that are going to be coming through from the green agenda. We have ring-fenced some money for a responsive fund, so that if there's something in particular that comes up that we haven't identified previously, that we identify a gap in our delivery, that we have a responsive fund to be able to address gaps that we've identified moving forward. And then we have the basic life and career skills. That is around those that again are furthest from the labour market, but it will include NEETs, so those individuals not in education, employment and training, to actually be able to give them a helping hand, increase their confidence and develop their abilities to actually move back into work or training and education. So there's quite a range of skills projects there. It will be quite an intensive year, that final year of delivery and skills. So we will be extremely busy with partners. Is that with partners like the county council? Yes. And that sort of thing, because other partners already do this? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All of this activity, we are working with partners, the college, we're working with county and a number of other training providers that are already active in the area. So we're not going to duplicate what's already available. We're actually looking to build on it and provide an extra level of options rather than repeating what's already there.
Just a couple of things that I didn't understand. What is ESOL?
English for speakers of other languages.
Okay. And there's a couple of asterisks which aren't explained. It's probably insignificant, but I was puzzled by that.
Okay, that is actually in relation to the bid. So life skills and career skills, there's a specific description of what those are as far as the bid is concerned, as far as the criteria for the bid is concerned. So there are certain things we can include in one area that we can't include in another, which is what the asterisks are for. I should have taken them out, it would have made life easier. But yeah, we can deliver some intensive life skills in some areas and less in the other intervention areas.
Lucy, thank you. In terms of employment support for economically inactive, I mean, this is key, isn't it? Because we're constantly faced with this really fundamental problem now within our economy, where a startling number of people are not simply economically inactive, but are becoming more economically inactive as time goes on. How can we tailor the offer that will emerge from this in such a way that makes, you know, those people not only more attractive in the labour market, but also, I mean, are we talking enough to employers, to the hiring sector, basically, to find out exactly what they want, so that these measures can actually be tailored around that requirement?
That will be part of the development. We, as I say, with the majority of the skills stuff, we can't deliver it until the final year. So we have 12 months to actually sit down with employers, sit down with individuals and the colleges to identify exactly how we get people through that pathway into work. So it may be that their first step is not necessarily straight into work. It may be into a training course that then moves them on to work. But yes, we are working very closely with employers to identify what those skills get. Hence the digital skills that came up, because there is a major gap for employers trying to recruit with digital skills levels. It also, that's why we've included the responsive fund in there, so that if we are sitting down with people, with businesses that have identified a need that's not covered anywhere else, we do have the opportunity to actually put some income into it and identify a solution to move people closer to that job market.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report, Zoe. Some great ideas in here. £3 million to be spent, exciting times. I mean that. I've just got a couple of questions. How much of the projects that are suggested in this report been informed by the Council's sustainability strategy, because there are some very specific suggestions in that strategy. So has that strategy influenced the projects outlined in this report? And the second question, the investment plan has to be submitted by Monday next week. So should any further suggested projects be sent to the chair and vice chair of this committee this week? And would they have the power to include those suggestions, possibly at the expense of projects that are already in the report?
You want me to do the second one first? Yes. Okay. Realistically, no, if I'm blunt. I think you want an honest answer. I think the challenge is not just engaging with the partners that would be delivering it, or any projects, any further projects within the next few days, and making sure that they are, excuse me, viable propositions. We would then also face the challenge of which ones do we then decide not to proceed with, and that would be quite difficult. Having said that, life's a challenge at the moment, generally, with all sorts of areas. So if there are some very, very compelling cases for the inclusion of things that we haven't included, and as you said, it's a very comprehensive list of interventions. But if there is something major that you think has been overlooked, then I'm happy to have the discussion and see what we can do. But at this stage, I couldn't guarantee that we would be able to move something out and move something in, so to speak. Thank you.
There is a little bit of flexibility in there because some of these are written at quite a high level, so we haven't gone into too much detail. As far as the sustainability plan, yes, we have taken as many of our plans and strategies into account when we've been developing them. It sounds like a lot of money, 2.9 million, but actually when you break it down into these various projects, they become quite small projects. So we've endeavoured as much as possible to include all elements of all of the strategies and all of the activities that we've identified in the programme. But yeah, if there is a project that you really think is missed, please speak to us. We have a certain level of flexibility, not a great deal, but we have some breathing space with some of the projects, and there may be something we could do.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just 2 points, really. One around a lot of been talked about skills and upskilling in terms of either the digital agenda or skills-based training in terms of the trades and things like that. I mean, of course, the irony is actually out on the high street amongst retailers and amongst especially the leisure and hospitality industry, that the shortage of staff around recruitment and the issues around that. Is there anything included in here that can probably help with either getting people into that industry to ensure that our leisure sector is thriving and that the people are there to, I mean, there have been several high-profile cases where staff haven't been available, where weddings have been cancelled, and you know, things like that. And you know, this is a real issue, especially on the high street amongst our restaurateurs and hoteliers that are facing this issue. Is there anything that we could do, certainly within the city, as part of this, to increase that? That's the first point. And the second point, I think, was around the digitisation agenda in and around the high street. I know once upon a time we did talk about free Wi-Fi within the city. Is that still something that we endeavour to do in terms of that, or is that just being kicked into the long grass?
If I deal with the leisure and tourism businesses first, they can come under the career skills and also the adult skills and also the need stuff. So if that, we know that that's a need and we know that there are vacancies in that, then we can focus that training around those jobs to make sure that there is an opportunity for those individuals once they've received their training, that there is a vacancy to go into. So yes, we can specifically focus on that area, there is that opportunity.
It wouldn't be a committee meeting without us coming back to this old chestnut, would it? In terms of digitalisation. Where we got to, some members will remember and some won't have been here when we started this, because it's been a very, very, very long journey, many years, in fact. We started on the digitalisation and free Wi-Fi on the high street with a project with a company called Elephant Wi-Fi, actually, many years ago, and that was costed out at a significant revenue cost. Ongoing revenue cost to provide the service. We then went out to tender to procure a service, and we were approached by a company that said that they could provide the service free of charge, and it wouldn't be there would be no cost to the council. You will all know there's always a cost somewhere. And one of the costs, non-financial costs, was access to the data that would be generated. You could imagine in this day and age, access to data around footfall and the type of people that are coming in and the demographics of the visitors and where they shop and how much they spend is a very, very valuable commodity that can be traded. And that's what we were forfeiting if we signed up to a free service. In the end, it was taken out of our hands by the company that we'd spent a lot of time talking to. We'd also spent a lot of time talking to the county council because to install this kit would have needed all sorts of permissions, way leaves and various other permissions to install kit on the high street, whether that's on private property or on lampposts or whatever. But ultimately, the company that we spent a lot of time dealing with, in the end, decided that it was not viable for them and withdrew from the negotiations. I suspect that one of the reasons for that is that this whole area is moving so quickly in terms of competitors and technology that if you don't act relatively quickly, you get overtaken by new systems, new services, new technologies. That's certainly been my experience in the past when it comes to digital technology. So in the end, we didn't pursue that, and we've not pursued the option of going back to look at whether we should provide it as an amenity for residents and shoppers at a cost to the City Council. We have recently launched the City app, which goes some way to doing what we wanted to do originally, which was to promote City Council and City Centre services and events. So we can still do that. What we don't have is a system where we can access data or manage or look at footfall information. So that's where we are at the moment, Jabba.
Thanks, Chair. It's a more general question about our ability to reflect as we move through the programme on the allocations and whether they're right. Obviously, changing circumstances, things that might be right at the moment, given the very tight labour market or issues that we're trying to address, may seem less relevant in a year's time. And there might be other things which, as Neil and other committee members were mentioning, are higher up the agenda. So I don't know what the ability will be to vary the programme, either the allocations between blocks or within the blocks. Will that be a process having to go back to government, or will they be broadly allocated across blocks with some delegation?
At the moment, we don't know the process, but what they are saying is we will be paid annually. So I would assume there'd be opportunity within that negotiation of an MOU to actually vary what we've got within our requirement. It's the way it worked with the European programme. You reviewed at the end of 12 months, and the new MOU meant you had some flexibility with changes to the programme. So we are assuming that will be the way. Otherwise, they'd give us an MOU for the whole programme. So we're guessing there'll be some flexibility within there.
So that might be an opportune moment, Chair, to have an annual review to see how things are going. Have we got the right weighting? How are different parts of the programme performing? Are they delivering against the objectives, or indeed does money need to be reallocated according to that? And that would be a potential suggestion.
Absolutely. I would look to review it on a biannual basis, actually, just to make sure everything's running along, so twice a year.
So perhaps we can see reports maybe coming six monthly or something like that to this committee. Jabba?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One final point was regarding the community asset-based programme and the allocation to WCT. I did remember asking officers at the last meeting, there's a huge amount of uncertainty around members of what the community asset-based programme is. Only James and I have been privy to some of the information of what that actually model looks like. So we need to be really clear of what that means and what that team or that allocation of funding is actually delivering out into the into the city. So if you can get some clarification around that, maybe some member support sessions in terms of what that actually means and what it means in this context of what WCT will actually be delivering on the front line.
I don't know about which committees actually will be allocated certain things, because some things might be best to say environment or communities, and then perhaps this committee can be sort of the high level stuff.
Yeah, Lucy, I mean, basically, yes, I'd endorse that approach. I think that, you know, we've got a model that works essentially in terms of how we take things through the committees, through P&R, and then ultimately, and I personally wouldn't see any reason why that we'd need to make any changes there.
So now we go on to the Museums Worcestershire Annual Review. Last week, this report was also sent to the Communities Committee, and after some robust questions, the committee actually gave Philippa and her staff a round of applause for the report, which I think is the first time it's ever happened. So over to you, Philippa.
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious that about half of the members that are here today were at the Communities Committee last week. So the last thing I want to do is make you listen to exactly the same thing again. So I think the most sensible thing for me to do probably is to give you some highlights that specifically relate to economic development, and then pass it back to you if you have specific questions to go into other areas. So just to summarise the museums for those of you who don't already know, we're a joint service between the city and the county councils. We've been that way now since 2010. And here in the city, we manage the two museums, the Commandery and the Museum and Art Gallery. We're covered by a joint committee, and officially we feed into the Communities Committee, but because obviously our work is very much both about the supporting of our residents, but also about bringing new visitors into Worcester, it's sort of suitable that we talk to both committees with perhaps a different emphasis to each of the two committees. So I'm just going to give you just an introduction, I think, to the really the two sites and what it is that we've achieved in that period, 21-22, particularly with an economic development bent to it. So it's worthwhile remembering that at the beginning of 21-22, we were still in lockdown in museums. We were one of the last to be able to open later than retail were, and so for the first 2 months of the year we were closed. So I'm very pleased that in now really only 12 months from that period, we're now back on track to be the same as we were in 2019 as far as visitor figures go. That's absolutely not the case across the country. The national museums have seen reductions of nearly 3/4, so we're really bucking the trend here in Worcester, which I think is something we should be very proud of. As a result, over that last year, we've seen secondary spend brought into the city by visitors to the museums in the region of just over £1 million to visitors to the Art Gallery and Museum, and just under £500,000 of visitors to the Commandery. And though it's a robust measurement that's used across the museum profession, that really is about, you come and visit a museum and maybe you'll get a cup of coffee or something while you're there. So those are real numbers that the visitors that are coming to us are then spending within the rest of the city. I also wanted to flag up the fact that we've been very successful over this year. It's something that we've grown year on year now over the last few years in using our core funding to lever in additional funding. And I really think this is the future for us in museums. So over this last year, we brought in about a quarter of our funding through external funding. And what really that enables us to do is not just do a core museum offer, but to enhance it, to do additional work, either with residents or with special, exciting projects that bring people in from further afield. So quickly, just to talk about the Commandery, I think the difference that the last couple of years that we've really tried to achieve at the Commandery is to make it a real diversity of users. So we relaunched the Commandery in 2017 with some City Council investment and some investment from elsewhere to remake it the destination visit that it continues to be. But it's a big site with outdoor space, great indoor spaces that really gives us that opportunity to use it for not just one purpose. But so I'm very pleased that now it has commercial opportunities within it. It has a partner business on site. We are able to use it to work very closely with our local schools and particularly with some of our community needs. And that we've started to use that as that network both within its very local community but also in a much wider sense. So we're making links across to academic organisations and to other cultural and heritage organisations. I should flag up that later this year we are opening an escape room on site, and that's thanks to funding that this committee has allocated under the city plan reserve. So thank you very much for a couple of years ago for deciding that was something you wanted us to take forward, and I'm hoping that will be a new stream of income, but be an opportunity to bring a different audience into the Commandery and enjoy parts of the museum that at the moment are underutilised. We're actually going to be testing the escape rooms over the next 3.5 months before we formally launch it. So if any members would like to be part of a testing trip to the Commandery escape room, do let me know and I'd be very happy to. So then let me go on to the Art Gallery Museum. The Art Gallery Museum really was extremely successful once we reopened this year with the Titanic Hope and Glory exhibition in the summer, which brought in record numbers in May and June. Now, last May and June, we were in a position where we had some quite challenging restrictions because of making sure that we mitigated the COVID risks. So it gave us that opportunity to do some testing, which was extremely useful. So for the first time ever, we used an online digital booking system for visitors to be able to come in and book a slot so that they'd make sure that they knew that they weren't crowding within the space. And that's really taught us an awful lot, particularly as we go into the next exhibition, which follows in October, which is Canaletto, which we are very excited about, and which is absolutely going to need some serious booking systems. And actually, the booking system for that is now live, and we're beginning to see that people are booking in for that already. But what that's also given us the chance to do is to give us a bit more data about the visitors that come to us. The difficulty with the Art Gallery Museum is because it's, free entry, pop in whenever you want type venue, which is fabulous, but it means it's harder for us to know more about that audience, whereas the booking system gave us a snapshot really to discover a lot more. So we had visitors to Titanic that came from as far afield as Canterbury, Exeter and Leeds, so really people have come a significant distance to Worcester specifically because of that exhibition. And this is something that we would hope that we will be able to develop further as time goes on, is that we draw them into the museum on the basis of those exciting exhibitions, but then we share with them much more of the history and the collections of Worcester itself. Which really leads me then briefly on to our ideas for development. We have funding already allocated in the Towns Fund to develop new galleries at both sites, the Worcestershire Soldier at the Commandery and then a permanent art gallery at the Art Gallery and Museum, which will give us that opportunity to display more of the collections that the city owns that currently aren't being seen, and really to be able to take those in new directions and new initiatives, both potentially commercial, but also an awful lot to do with education opportunities. And alongside the funding that's been allocated within the city, we also now have a newly established charity and a set of trustees there that we'll be able to work with to help us on that development road as we go forward. I think I'm going to leave it at this point to save me repeating everything I said last week, and ask if anyone has any further questions.
Chair, thank you. I'm still kind of reflecting on how wise it would be to have half a dozen councillors in a locked room, but be that as it may. First of all, data. And you touched on this, Philippa, about how we make our museums offering, more reflective of what people actually want to experience, rather than we assume we know what they want to experience, and we can perhaps today use that data much more readily than we may have been able to do some years ago. And the second point is, how do we continue to develop our ability to look at the real depth of what we've got available, perhaps via our sort of digital capability these days that, again, some years ago we didn't have that opportunity. So there's a couple of pretty broad questions there. I don't know what your thoughts are on those.
Yeah, very happy to talk you through some of the thoughts there. You're absolutely right that knowledge of what our audience want is absolutely key to the way we develop. It's very easy when you put together an exhibition to put together something that you want to see personally. That's not necessarily what our audience wants to see, and that's really what we're there to do. We undertake quite a lot of surveying of our audience as we go through the year, with quite a lot of kind of generic questions that we can then track trends as we go forward. But we also undertake a fair bit of consultation. So we've been specifically consulting recently with our existing audience to the Worcestershire Soldier to ask them how would they like to see that new display at the Commandery. The Worcestershire Soldier display is a very comprehensive and popular display in the Art Gallery and Museum, although it makes not a great deal of sense within the wider context there. And putting it in the Commandery with its story of the Civil War is going to be a really interesting one as to how we take that forward to really bring the story of military history up to date in a comprehensive way, but also as a resource that people can use to get much more information out of it that's really relevant to everybody, whether you're interested in military history or not. And so that talking to audience is really important in order to get to some of the detail. And already we've had some very interesting conversations with individuals about what they think a contemporary military museum needs to have in it, which we will then incorporate into that new planning. Which actually leads me perfectly to the second half of your question, particularly about digital resources. So say if we take something like the Worcestershire Soldier, a significant amount of work has been done in the 22 or 3 years since that was originally put in. So now, for example, there are about 100,000 records, digital records about people in Worcester who fought in World War I, photographs, diaries, all kinds of fascinating information. And those are interesting if they're your grandparents, your great-grandparents, or indeed if they're the person who lived in your house before you did. And that's something that we can make that connection to in the gallery now that we haven't been able to do up until now. So that's very much part of that planning for going forward. For us, really, it's all going to be about what you can access using your mobile phone as you come in. I'm very pleased that both sites now have full Wi-Fi access funded by cultural development funding. So that's something that enables visitors as they come in to be able to access an awful lot more information.
COVID as well, a lot of online seminars and that sort of thing were also set up as well, and I think they're continuing as well. So it's very much the digital platform as well as the sort of the physical. Neil and then Jabba.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Philippa. Yeah, you made a similar point to David earlier about the value of online data. He said that visitors had come from Canterbury, Essex and Leeds, suggesting that they specifically came to Worcester for the exhibitions at the museum. At Worcester Pitchcroft Park Run last Saturday, there was a runner from Melbourne, Australia. Now, Pitchcroft Park Run is a wonderful event, but I doubt that that person came from Australia just to take part in it. It's more likely that they came to Worcester for a wedding or something like that. So I do absolutely agree with the point made about the value of data, so we can, you know, put on exhibitions that will appeal to particular sections of society. But I just wanted to sort of question the interpretation that you gave of that particular data, because I imagine that those people actually here for a different reason, saw that there was that exhibition and then went to the exhibition. I think it was that way around, personally. And the second point I wanted to raise was prompted by James's contribution. I mean, I recently supervised a teenager doing work experience in my workplace, and I was devastated to find out from this particular teenager that there is nothing to do in Worcester. Now, I'm a 40-year-old man. I've no idea what a teenager would enjoy doing. My point is, the suggestion is maybe, in order to find out what people want in their local museums, you know, surveys of some kind could be done in local schools. Because you said the Titanic exhibition was massively popular. And I imagine there was a fair amount of teenagers that went to that exhibition, so perhaps some sort of level of survey could be done within schools. And that might make that teenager in particular, and others, a bit more positive about the city they live in. But yeah, it was quite an eye-opener to be told that. But just a suggestion prompted by James's question about how we find out what people want in their museums. So I hope that was useful.
I think it's an excellent idea, I really do. Teenagers are notoriously the age that we can lose people from museums, that you'll often come as a child and then you'll come back with your own children, but often you lose them at that teenage years. And actually that's exactly where we want to try and keep them. So I think that's an excellent idea of reaching them through schools. During COVID, we launched our own online work modules, work experience modules, which actually I think is an excellent way of reaching out to those that have got a little bit of interest in history or art, but actually hadn't thought about how they might be able to make that work in their career going forward. So that's really something I think there's an opportunity to take further, and I think you're absolutely right, surveying them through schools is an excellent way forward. My own teenage daughter is was quite scathing about some exhibitions that we had previously, but actually has been extremely positive about the ones recently. So I'm hoping that's a positive sign that we're turning it around to the right ones for that age group. And I absolutely take your point about the data that we have and how we present it. And I probably was guilty of assuming that everybody came just for us, although I'd like to think that they do come for us. And we do have anecdotal data that people have come specifically for us. And that's something we'll hope to be able to dig a little bit further in to get a bit more of that information as we go forward.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose two questions. One in and around our Civil War story and how far have we got in terms of developing that, or to the maximum amount that we can develop in terms of that. And I mean, certainly that's been a slow burner over the years in terms of developing that. I remember, 12 years ago starting that story, on top of Fort Royal Hill, in terms of the Jefferson and Adams story, obviously. In terms of, so I just wanted to ask regarding that element of our strategy in terms of culture and museums, and linked to that is what is the image of Worcester abroad in terms of in terms of the States or in other countries in terms of that Civil War history and the specific reason they would come here? Has that been analysed? Could we do a study? Could we make more of it? And how does that then feed into the cultural strategy?
I might let Zoe come back with that final bit. It is mentioned in the working groups that we had towards the cultural strategy, but I don't know whether it appears in the final version. So you're absolutely right. We did some excellent research back 12 years ago, suggesting that the Civil War story was a unique Worcester story that had the potential to be a kind of a driver for tourism to Worcester, specifically from international visitors. at that point, we were hoping that we could create an element of kind of critical mass, I guess, within the city that would get more than just the commandery behind it. And I would say one of the things that we have kind of discovered as we've tried to take that forward is that the diversity of history in Worcester is something that nobody wants to let go of, actually, and I don't think that that's a negative in any way. We have so many great stories that nobody wants to necessarily just focus on one. So what we found is that the Civil War story is an absolutely a good driver to visitors to the commandery, but it's only to a proportion of our visitors. And so for us, we've kind of moved that as being that it's the central focus of the story at the commandery, and I see no reason to ever change that as the central focus of the story to the commandery. And I would hope that we would continue to network that out to that's where we have real strengths, where we can link in with other providers across the city and further afield to really start to bring that develop as time goes on. I mentioned in the report that we've taken that now into a school programme that specifically talks about democracy. It's a challenge the way it falls within the school curriculum, but really we've started to build that up now into something that really does work. But I think really we have to look at Worcester's history in its whole, because there are a lot of interested people who have interests in the heritage of the city that are more than just the Civil War.
I was probably not going to be as polite as my colleague. I think one of the difficulties we've had over the years, let me start again slightly. I think I've been in 9 years now, and I think there's been an absolute change, a step change in everybody around this table. I think there's been a step change in the feeling in terms of what art and culture and tourism and the visitor economy can bring to the city. So I think we've moved an awful long way in a positive sense, certainly. That's my personal view. I think one of the reasons that we haven't possibly moved as far as we'd like to is because, exactly as Philippa says, we have a very varied and diverse history. And we've tried to accommodate all of that in our offer, which I think has been detrimental to us in getting over the message, as it were. What is Worcester, famous for, apart from the sauce? I think, we've talked, we've talked about the arts and culture strategy, and clearly the Civil War is an important component of that. In the same way that Elgar is an important component, and I think we need to probably in the first years of rolling out our strategy try to concentrate a little bit more on the things we want to be known for. Nationally and internationally, and I know I was looking at, in the development of the strategy, I was looking at what Wigan had done, and what Wigan has done in the delivery of their action plan against their strategy is to look at different themes in different years. So that's not to say that we would tear up certain things and never go back to them again, but there is definitely a focus in particular years on certain things, and I think that would help us in terms of what we're doing. I was watching a programme about Puccini the other night, and in Lucca, where Puccini was born, and I don't know how big Lucca is. I was just going to try and go.
It's a large town.
Yeah, well, in the annual Puccini festival attracts 40,000 people, and I was just reflecting on that compared to our Elgar festival. And thinking we've got some way to go, but it can be done. I think it can be done with that level of focus. I'll stop at that point. Thank you.
And I know recently, Philippa and her staff have been doing some sessions with the Ukrainian refugees around war and the civil war, and sort of the sort of effects of it. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'm very happy to. It's fascinating, isn't it? We volunteered when only the very first Ukrainian refugees were arriving in Worcester. We volunteered to be a kind of a central hub where they could come and find out more information from various different partners, and we would to some extent entertain their families while they were there, in order to give them that opportunity to do both at once. And it really started off with, we would use the collections as a resource to talk to them about it. Frankly, we were expecting we were going to need to use very neutral parts of the collection, because actually, these are people who are escaping from real challenges. Fascinatingly now, though, the civil war was really interesting to the Ukrainian refugees. To some extent, there's something of the story of knowing that you can rebuild a city successfully after such a big tragedy. And actually, it also, there's a level of, we weren't trying to do a therapeutic moment through there, but there was an element of actually to be able to look at the concept of battle within a slightly more light-hearted situation was, I think, quite a release to some of them. So it was something we were very surprised that the Battle of Worcester was something that had such power there, but I think something that we're going to want to pursue in more detail as we go forward. And there's going to be, we're just talking to the team here within the city about what opportunities we can do to take that programme further at the Commandery, with some ongoing sessions for the Ukrainian refugees as more of them come to the city.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's a comprehensive answer. And I mean, I think David's right. I mean, trying to be everything to everyone always, we dilute the focus of what we're trying to achieve on. And it was more of a general question. Actually, if the focus has changed and I mean, other cultural sensitivities come to light in terms of that, it's always sensible to, take account of those and, move on to something that we can actually deliver on. And when the time is right, revisit those. So it's just more of a general one in terms of actually us as a city out in the international community. What are we well known for? If it's those two things, is there mileage in doing that? If there isn't, there isn't. Right? Thank you.
I think I've cocked up the machine, but there we are. We're working again. I think this is meandering into a wider discussion, Chair, but it's one that's probably valuable to have at some point, because I think there's a strength in the diversity of Worcester's offer, actually, that if you think about the sporting offer, the cultural offer, the diversity of the wider South Worcestershire visitor economy, that sometimes we can miss in perhaps pursuing one or two individual things that might be the flavour of the month, but actually, if you have a diverse offer, you're not beholden to one particular part of that strength. I think in terms of what I would be interested in is the visitors, to what extent the visitors have returned to places like Worcester. Is it internal visitors to the UK that have come back? Because we saw last summer many more people were visiting parts of the UK that maybe they hadn't visited because of the risk of international travel and all the COVID restrictions or the uncertainty. Are we getting visitors back to Worcester from further afield, from the States or Canada, etc., or Australia? And are we getting them back in the kind of numbers? Is there an opportunity to re-pitch into some of those economies about Worcester and what our strengths are? And so I think wider than just the museums offer, there is something about looking at the wider tourism strategy, visitor economy strategy, and saying, what is the evidence telling us and what are the opportunities, and how does the museum offer that? I think you've done spectacularly well in terms of being able to get back to where we were. If we think of other parts of the economy, we talked about public transport earlier, 50% of pensioners have not gotten a bus since COVID. Those are the facts. So there are some parts of the utilisation of public services that have not returned to anywhere near where they were, and we're seeing the consequential impact in terms of some of the services. So to get to the kind of usage and occupancy that you're describing in the museum service, quite distinct from other museums in the UK is a real detriment, a real credit, I think, to what you're doing in terms of the museums offer across Worcestershire. We should, you know, absolutely thank you for the work you're doing. I think linked to, I think it's Neil who's talking about using the digital offer. I think there is something about there exploring how we can really utilise that, because I imagine that came into its own in terms of lockdown, people looking for those resources, and I think that applies to the wider city. You know, people do want to see that digital offer matching what they expect in many other services. We talked about the high street and things about Wi-Fi and, you know, representing that digital offer, and I think that is something we ought to think about as a city. How do we pull that offer together? Because that's the one thing that I think sometimes we've struggled with. I've got no problem with it. I think there's a strength and diversity of offer, but actually need to put it together to be able to pull those strands into that marketing strategy for the city. And I think there's a little bit more work to do there.
Did you want me to say something there? I would agree that I think the tourist strategy is something that we need to take forward. There's recently been a review, well, a reworking, I think, of the Visit Worcestershire, the destination management organisation, and it feels like we're in a different place now, actually, which I'm really pleased about. And I think there's a real opportunity that then takes us in that international stage. As far as your question about actual visitors to Worcester, I would say yes, entirely. Last year, they have almost entirely been British rather than from further afield. Although I'm really pleased that our numbers have not radically dropped this year, which that could have happened in those circumstances. We could have had a big rise last year and then dropping this year as a result. So I think it's one we need to drill further down into the data to take forward. And I think that message of what does Worcester stand for is something that it's going to take all of us to work on, I think, to get right long term.
Worcester communities and that sort of thing. I know that within the joint committee, we've done some work about the Asian community and that sort of thing, about how they're sort of the communities are welcome in Worcester and that sort of thing. And perhaps you want to have a little.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We have, I mean, one of the legacies of being one of the oldest collections in the country is that we have actually a very interesting collection of things from across the world, collected in very different positions to where we currently are. But actually there's some, within that, there's some real treasures that reach through to some of our communities that now live in Worcester, that really there's at the moment there's a bit of a disconnect, and we really want to join those together in a bigger detail so that we have a collection that does reflect the people that live in Worcester and their stories. So there's an interesting kind of linkage there. So, for example, we've worked with the Mela Festival specifically to look at some of our Indian collections that were collected during an interesting period of military history potentially, but that actually now there's a real stories to create within that. And then we've noticed that there are significant gaps then within the collections, periods where Worcester was not doing much collecting from its local communities, that really now it's time to do that to make sure that we don't lose any of those stories. So there's a programme of work now that really is about looking at, with quite critical eyes, I think, as to what Worcester has collected over the last now 150 years, nearly 200 years, and making sure that we haven't missed the important stories of Worcester.
Just to say thank you for the excellent work, and it's been a brilliant report. Okay.
To revisit the previous item because you never asked us to
yes.
agree the recommendation.
Right. Sorry about that. Going back to the previous item, we've never actually agreed the recommendations. So the UK SPF funding bid, the committee confirms that the preferred projects and gives permission to submit an application by the deadline of the 1st of August 2022 and authorises the Managing Director to oversee the final bid documentation in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee and to ensure the timely submission. Are you all agreed? Thank you. That's all right. And obviously we note the museum's undertakings. So we now go on to Q1 performance reports. That's David.
That's me. Thank you very much, Chair. I won't go through all of the information of this, just to pick out a few things in terms of some narrative and then some specifics. I think it's fair to say at the moment it's incredibly busy time for us. We're making good progress with the Arches project, as I mentioned earlier. We're bringing a report to members seeking agreement for the next phase, which would involve the Jack's Chicken shop. Those of you that were at the Baton event on Friday night, sorry, I'm losing track already which day it was, and it's only Monday today. Friday night would have seen that we had quite a crowd down by the Arches, and it was excellent, you know, and it was something that we couldn't have done a year ago. So that's moving well. The arts and culture strategy we've mentioned, that is now out for consultation at the moment. With regard to the Future High Streets Fund, we will be bringing a significant report to members in September with regard to the planning application for the centre. In the meantime, we've had a reasonably good take-up on the retail and property enhancement scheme, where we're projecting a spend of £446,000 against an allocation of 600. I say reasonable, it is actually very good, and I was very nervous because we've tried these things in the past, and it's been very difficult to get any traction. So that's moving very well. So lots of activity on the Future High Streets Fund. In terms of Town Fund, I'm very pleased to say that the department has now signed off the Shrub Hill business case. So all of the business cases now for the Town Fund have now been agreed. Some were agreed. The very first one was the university one, was agreed some time ago, and work has progressed on that, as you all know. But other business cases, the Shrub Hill is the perfect example. Because we were not able to proceed as we originally planned with the acquisition of the bus station, we had to rewrite that proposal significantly, and that's now been agreed by the department. So that's very good. In terms of some of the specifics, I just wanted to mention, I've mentioned some of the projects in terms of the key performance indicators. Really, I just wanted to mention the planning performance. Planning performance has been a really, really difficult area for us over the last 18 months, 2 years. We've had significant staff changes in that time. We've been managing with interim staff. We're now starting to fill the majority of the roles on a permanent basis. We still have a couple of or 1 or 2 vacancies that we've not been able to fill. But I'm really pleased that we've managed to get the performance back on track. We're now in a position where 80% of major planning applications are being determined within the 13-week period, and in terms of non-major, 72% within 8 weeks, and we've reduced our backlog of applications. We had over 300 applications in a backlog. We've reduced that by 70%. So I'm very pleased that a major statutory performance area of the business, we've managed to get it back on track, and that's a lot of hard work from the staff who've managed to do that. So that was the only area of performance that I just wanted to highlight. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Simon?
I just wondered whether we could have any context in relation to the retail voids figures, because 91 feels like a lot in terms of the central retail core, and I fully accept the other parts of the city, St John's, etc., tithing, where we have other areas of retail. But looking at the central retail core, that would seem a lot, but I don't know what that is in a percentage of retail units, and how does that compare with comparable cities? Are we faring better? Are we in with a pack, or are we worse than that?
David?
It does feel like a lot when you walk up and down the high street and around the city centre. It doesn't feel that bad, I don't think. I try not to be, all rose tinted about it, and try to look at it objectively, but it doesn't feel that bad. I don't know how it compares. At the previous committee meeting, you asked us to prepare a report on the city centre in terms of the visitor numbers and the retail offer, and we'll make sure that there's a deeper analysis of that and some benchmarking information and trajectory information in that report.
That would be most helpful, Chair. And I think the other thing is what we can do about it then. What are the kind of programmes? Are there other places? If we do find, let's say we find that I can see the numbers have gone down over that time, but they're raw numbers. If we find that actually the context is that those are something we want to see addressed, which I'm sure we do, then what are the opportunities to help leverage in new retailers, open up, work with some of those property owners that might have an unrealistic expectation of their property in the current market, to try and get active frontage, which is what we all want to see. And I suppose related to that, whether there are any changes in the planning policy that are necessary. There are some which areas of the city we just say are only possible for retail. Or is that something that we can hold to? I'm thinking of the high street. Or should we be allowing some more active frontage which isn't pure retail? I think that's the kind of dialogue, Chair, that would be useful to get into.
Thank you, Chair. I think in answer to your first question, I think we are with the Future High Streets Fund doing an awful lot now. Everything from improving the feel of the place, if I can put it that way, in terms of the improvement to the public realm and footpaths, through to the grant offers that we're offering landlords to improve empty units. As I say, I think I'm quite pleased the level of take-up there has been there. I think one of the challenges is always absent landlords. For some reason, which I've been doing this a long time now, I still don't understand. Some landlords are quite happy to see properties sitting almost derelict for years and years and gain no income from them. Having said that, I do know that some empty properties, previous occupiers are still paying rent on them, and so the landlord has no incentive to look to bring in a new occupier, and that's a real challenge, and we don't really have the powers to intervene. I know the government is talking about bringing in new powers to give local authorities the opportunity to compulsory purchase empty properties. I would imagine that, knowing a little bit about compulsory purchase, that is not an easy thing to do, and it would take a lot of time and effort. So that's one of the challenges. In terms of the planning, we have made changes. Our primary retail area, where we only allowed primary retail shops and nothing else, we have shrunk that in planning terms, because we have to be realistic. Worcester is no different to any other large urban area where there is generally an over-provision of retail space. So what we can't afford to do is to dig our heels in and be silly about it and say, you know, we want this to be a retail unit if there is no chance of it being a retail unit. So I think we're being pragmatic. Having said that, I think we do still need to guard against the market running away and being in a position where anything will do, because, you know, I want to be very protective. We have a very beautiful city centre, and I think we need to be aware of that and make sure that we don't allow anything to take over. And of course, once you've changed a planning use on a building, you then have no control over what you might put in it. So you might want to change you might want to give consent to a very nice restaurant. You know, that nice restaurant might close within 6 months, and once you've given that change of use, you're open. You know, you're at the mercy of the landlord, really. So it's a difficult one, but we have moved on the planning front to be more pragmatic, but trying to guard against the sorts of development that we really wouldn't want to see. Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you, Chair. David, I just wanted to check, you know, city centre footfall, on another committee, I think it was said that footfall is actually based on the car park usage. Is that the way it's measured? So what is it measured by, please? Thank you.
No, we have, for me, the car park income is a reasonably good barometer in terms of the level of activity in the city centre, because we have a number of car parks spread across the city. So it's a useful, comparing this year to last year to the year before, how much we're getting in terms of the money in the machines, for want of a better way of putting it. So I think that's always a good barometer to look at the number of people coming into the city. Of course, it only catches those people that are driving. We have a number of footfall counters around the city that give us the number of passers-by. The problem with that, of course, is it is passers-by. So if I've got a particularly busy day between here and the Guildhall and the MAG, you know, I can be down as 8 people, you know, on a bad day. So it's not entirely accurate, but it's footfall counters.
Okay, because I was just thinking, with the improvements to the town centre, the public realm, hopefully we will get an improvement in the number of people who feel comfortable walking and cycling into the city centre. There are counters on the cycling storage in Crown Gate, so maybe we could have access to that. So we've got a measurement of perhaps cyclists coming in, because at the moment you're not counting people who cycle. And there is evidence that people who come by foot and by bike actually spend more money than people who come by car, because they're not looking at their watch going, I've got to get back to the car park. Sure. You know, and there's a whole chunk, and it's almost like if we're spending this money on making the public realm better for pedestrians and we're not particularly measuring it, how do we know how successful that public realm investment has been?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points. One around planning performance. Glad things are on the up. I mean, we've had, I'm sure most members have had a number of complaints regarding the delays in that process. I just wanted to ask, in terms of during that period and the decisions that were made, how many appeals were made in terms of decisions that weren't made in time, or decisions that were then overturned at appeal as well? If there are any data around that. And then I've got a second point to make.
I think I'm just opening. I think there is, within the set of KPIs, some appeal decision data. I'm just now going to scroll frantically.
I don't think there are any.
give me your second point while I find the time to scroll through. So if I had papers in front of me, it'd be easier. Oh, here we are. Look. Yeah. So, thank you, Chair. So there is appeals of planning major decisions in the table, and we're currently there are no appeals on major, and then there are. And there's a second table further on planning appeals. So there is some data in there. In terms of anecdotal feedback, I'm not aware of there being any particular increase in the number of appeals that are being made and decisions that are being won or lost on appeal.
Okay, let me rephrase that. How many complaints have you had for non-determination within the statutory period of time?
I don't have that information in front of me, but we can get that and make sure that we can circulate it.
73%.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get the complaints information and circulate that.
Okay, thanks. I've got a second. The secondary point was around in terms of something Councillor Geraghty said around zoning, probably zoning or de-restricting certain classifications on the high street. I mean, a perfect example of that's happened in terms of the class use changes when central government in terms of development above the shop, and we've seen how an influx of applications within the city centre of conversions into flats or rabbit hutch style accommodation with no sort of associated plan in terms of amenity space or services like doctors, etc., that is going to need it. And that's kind of changing the landscape within the city centre. Naturally, those people will obviously need a more leisure, late night time economy in terms of to satisfy their needs. So I can understand where I'm coming from, but the problem with that is obviously we've still got an existing ageing population within the city centre that is now finding that invasion, if you like, of younger people now living above that with a totally different lifestyle, and that is coming to odds. So I think it really needs to be a balance, and that planning policy has to be consistent with what we're obviously trying to achieve.
Agreed.
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I want to return to the issue about retail voids. First thing I spotted on this chart is that it doesn't actually have a target. From what you say, it would be nice to think that the target is 0. In a perfect world, we'd be looking to get there, but it seems a bit strange that there isn't any kind of target to focus future direction. One of the things you were expressing frustration about, which I totally agree with, is the long-term voids. And it's always occurred to me, and I don't know what your thoughts are about the feasibility of this, that if business properties are left empty for a prolonged period of time, perhaps some kind of surcharge on the business rates, an escalating one, which gets more and more painful every year that the place is empty, might focus the owner's minds. I don't know how possible that is within the current rules. The only other point was just to ask your reassurance that future developments within the retail area of the city centre will not add to the problem unnecessarily, that any development should be mindful of the fact that we currently have void properties. We don't want to create more retail areas while we've still got a lot empty.
Okay. the point about targets, I think we need to improve the information. I think possibly a target of no voids is not something I would want to put in, because I wouldn't want to set officers targets that are not achievable. It becomes a bit of a meaningless target in terms of what we ask officers to look at. I think I'd probably phrase it in terms of, coming back to Simon's point, more about benchmark comparisons. So understanding where we sit, having a target in there around a benchmark, and looking at where other comparable, cathedral cities look on in terms of this. I think is probably the way to look at that, so we can pick that up within the context of what we're doing in response to Simon's request at the previous meeting. With regard to the legislation for increasing business rates, I would need to go away and look at what we can or can't do within the current law. I'm not sure that we are able to do anything, and that there might be something we can do locally. You would have to vote through a local bylaw or something, I don't know. But we can go and look at that. Anything that we're as part of the Future High Streets Fund, we have been looking to try to acquire a number of empty sites, empty properties, and it has been an absolute nightmare for the officers to try and get to a point. You would think that somebody who owns an empty office or owns a piece of derelict land would be happy to sell it, wouldn't you? And for some reason, it is incredibly difficult. And then your final point, of course, if somebody puts in a planning application for a particular unit, the application, the plan application is determined on the suitability of that unit there. There is members who have been on planning. No, there is such thing as a sequential test, where if you want to put something in an area that is not something we would normally allow, we have to make sure that the applicant goes through a sequential test to prove that it couldn't be located elsewhere. But it would be very difficult to say to somebody, don't put your shop there, put it in the unit next door, particularly if the unit next door was, as we've got in a number of cases, going back to the previous discussion, a number of dilapidated properties. But we are doing absolutely as much as we can, really, within the planning rules to make sure that we get the occupiers in the places we want. And Jabba makes a very good point, really, about conversion to residential and the lack of amenity that sits alongside that. In a number of those cases, it's outside of our control, because it's allowable under the planning regime. So, but within the rules, we are trying to do what we can to make sure that we protect the city and take development in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions then on PED projects. I'm concerned about the progress being made on the strategic play area development plan. We're now looking to get a formal report in January, just around about the time when we're supposed to be prioritising those the outcomes of the play area, just about the time that we'll go through the budget bun fight. So that's just I'm just expressing a concern, and I don't think I've seen the draft spec. I don't know if the chair has. And it was supposed to be out last week. So that's question one. Question two, there was a great deal of discussion on the arts and cultural strategy for the city during the last meeting about how that would be broadcast across the city. Do we have any details on how it has been broadcast or how it will be broadcast? Those are my two questions. Thank you, Chair.
With regards to your first point, I agree. It's taken too long. I don't have any more detail in front of me than what's here, so I'll take that away and make sure that we do what we can to absolutely accelerate the process. It's been going on too long, you know. In terms of your second point, I don't know if you want to say anything, Zoe, about the arts and culture consultation, if that's okay. Thank you.
It's currently out for consultation. It will be out until the end of August. Then we'll take the results of that. So we've done mailing lists to all of our strategic partners, people that have expressed an interest, key organisations across the city. They've all had a link to that consultation. It should be on the website as well. Yeah. Once we get the details and the information coming through at the end of August, we will then revamp the cultural strategy, taking in the advice, and develop the action plan alongside it, and then we will relaunch more widely to deliver the strategy.
Could we, as members of this committee?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I'm surprised we haven't.
Yeah, I am actually. Yeah, will do. Do you? I'll send you the link to the consultation, and then we'll bring it back once we've had the details. We'll bring back our the results of the consultation, so we can develop the action plan to the committee. Yeah.
If I may, Chair, we did discuss, and it was only an option, about broadcasting it in a slightly different way to residents as well. So I think it was Worcester Now magazine that was discussed. I actively looked at it this time round and was disappointed not to see it.
So okay.
Was it City Life or Worcester Now? It was one of those magazines, one of the ones we do. So I am slightly concerned that we are missing out a huge tranche of the audience that are intended to benefit from the strategy.
I can certainly look for alternatives at the moment, and I'll look into City Now.
Chair, thank you. Largely the points that I was going to raise have been dealt with in responses to Simon and Jabba. I guess the key issue for me is, and it's data again really, is at what point would the data become meaningful enough, rigorous enough? You know, we talk broadly about reconfigurations of parts of the city and how we potentially see their usage. Can we really, how much of that is data driven? How much of it is part of essentially an experience thing that you know, experienced officers have got that sense of you know, where things are going within the city, and you know, that they can adjust their view according to that. I mean, I guess the number one I'm sort of driving at is, you know, we see trends within this emerging over a period of years. How rigorous a trend does it have to be before it can actually really inform what we're looking to do here? Because we've spoken at length over a couple of years about, you know, potentially changes to the city and, you know, residential stuff coming in and so on and so forth. You know, it's quite a deep subject, and I'm conscious of time, but do you have any sort of thoughts on that now as we go forward?
Yes, I think it's a big question. I think in terms of the bids that we've put together, so the Cultural Development Fund bid that we were successful with, Future High Streets Fund, Town Fund, all of those are a mix really. They are data driven in terms of making the case for significant government, arts council, whatever, investment in the city. So you have to have the socio-economic indicators to demonstrate why you're putting forward a particular business case. So it's very, very data driven in that respect. And we spend a lot of time and a significant amount of money on pulling that data together to set out, you know, the sort of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, as it were, for want of a better phrase. That's one point. I think the other point is it is driven also by opportunity. We have to look at parts of the city and think, where can we make a difference? And you know, if there are parts of the city where buildings are in public ownership, for example, that gives us a greater opportunity to make things done. You know, I mentioned the bus depot previously in terms of the town fund. You know, that was an aspiration, but it is without having some of those things in place, it's incredibly difficult to turn an aspiration into a reality. So part of it is data driven in terms of putting together what our interventions should look like. Part of it is around looking at where we've got opportunity in the city to make those interventions. And I think the third, because I always like threes, I think that third component is really knowledge and ambition of the people around this table bring to the party. Thank you.
No. I've just got one AOB, but well, because we've got an extra meeting to do with the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review, and we've got an extra meeting on the 3rd of October for PED, when we can discuss all the papers, so that, and then our council meeting is on the 17th of October, and then dependent on the result, sorry? Oh, sorry. Noting, yes, sorry about that. Noting these that the place in economic development notes the council's Q1 performance. But I'm just letting you know that we've got an extra meeting of PED on the 3rd of October to discuss the review, so that it can be into consultation and that sort of thing, and council will be on the 17th of November. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you.